Welcome to the Natural Areas Association 2021 webinar series. I'm Maura McGinty-Kloss, NAA's Outreach and Communications Manager, and I'm delighted that you're joining us for today's presentation. The Natural Areas Association is a national nonprofit. We're dedicated to the support and advancement of natural science professionals around the world. And our community identifies challenges, develops solutions, and shares critical findings, advancing practices in conservation, preservation, and restoration of nature through networking and collaboration. For over 40 years, NAA has supported your work in natural areas management by bringing you the latest science through our Natural Areas Journal, which is a peer-to-peer quarterly, stewardship and action programs, which are live workshops, and we're trying to find ways to give those to you virtually as well. A state natural areas program roundtables that talk about problems of particular land management for various state agencies. The annual Natural Areas Conference. A science advisory committee dedicated to keeping all NAA members informed regarding critical and new approaches to land management problems that'll benefit future conservation, restoration, and preservation, and then of course, monthly webinars like these. The benefits of membership are vast. So you'll see here on the slide, you get access to all the webinars and archives, access to our Natural Areas Journal, inclusion in all the state natural areas roundtables, and then of course, online networking through our portal and through our events. Membership in the NAA is only $79, and if you choose to join at the end of the 7-day period, we will apply that $29 to your membership, so you'll only pay $50. So what a deal. I also want to talk to you about some of the upcoming webinars. We are going to be hosting current and future carbon storage capacity in southeastern Pennsylvania forests on March 16th, as well as on April 20th, one that is actually more about helping you advance your programs through grant writing, understanding how to describe your program, making the case to get funding, all those things that are really important to help us to get our work done. And now I want to turn my attention back to our presentation today. And let me introduce our speaker. So today's webinar, Budburst, is being presented by Dr. Emma Oschrin. Emma earned her PhD in evolution, ecology, and behavior from Indiana University, where she studied plant community ecology. And her research focused on how co-occurring invasive plant species interact with each other and then impact native prairie communities. Emma also worked in conservation nonprofit sector at the Mono Lake Committee in Eastern California, where she gained an appreciation for interpretive science education. And now as Budburst Director, she helps people engage with nature in their communities and works to turn community scientists' contributions into research and meaningful conservation action. Throughout her educational work and experience, she's developed a passion for effective science communication and believes that connecting to all plants all around us can serve as a gateway to the broader environmental activism. So Emma, I'm going to turn it to you.
Thanks again for the introduction. My name is Emma Oschrin, and I am the Director of Budburst at the Chicago Botanic Garden. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about Budburst, our program, what we do, the types of research that we do, the way that we can be used in an educational setting, and of course, how you all can participate if you're interested as well. So to get us started, Budburst is a community science project. We are run out of the Chicago Botanic Garden, and we bring together researchers, educators, and community members, and we all work together to answer ecological questions, a lot of them focused on climate change. And we do this by studying the timing of seasonal changes in plants, which is also called phenology, which we'll talk about in a few more slides. But before we get into the details about phenology and about our work, I just want to take a moment to talk about Budburst as a community science project, what that term means and why we use it. So community science, this is a definition that we borrowed from SciStarter that we really like. And it states that community science is the public involvement in inquiry and discovery of new scientific knowledge. So this means that community members, no matter the age, no matter your background, you can participate in a scientific project, you can learn, you can collect data, And that data is going to be used both by researchers and by community members if they're interested. So those are a couple of the tenets of community science, that anyone can participate in the project, it's open to all, and that the data are freely and publicly available, which is the case with Budburst. So research scientists and community scientists can participate in Budburst, and then if you're interested in exploring the data and learning more on the data analysis side, you have access to the data that you and thousands of other people have collected over the course of the project. Just to make mention of this, we call Budburst a community science project, but this also falls into the category of citizen science, participatory science, community science. It's all wrapped up in a similar vein, so you might have heard those other terms used. And here we're using them relatively interchangeably, and we use community science at Budburst. So you'll hear me refer to our project as a community science project moving forward. So to get back into the details of what Budburst does, as I mentioned, we study phenology, and this is the study of the timing of seasonal changes in plants and animals, although in our focus, we are mainly referring to plants and what we do. And phenology, even if you haven't heard that term before, I guarantee you've been paying attention to phenology every year. So phenology, like I said, is just looking at seasonal changes, in our case, in plants. So if you've ever noticed in the springtime when trees start to get their buds and start to have their flowers bloom, or if you've noticed in the fall when trees start to lose the color or start to gain color in their leaves and start to have their leaves dropping, you've been paying attention to phenology. If you're looking at these seasonal changes, you're making these observations. So what we do at Budburst is just ask people to record those observations. If you're paying attention to them anyway, we just ask that you write down that data and you send it over to us. And it helps us build this enormous repository of data looking at when plants go through their seasonal changes over the course of the year from year to year across a broad geographical range. So we have data on many different plant species across the entire US and in some places in Canada, looking at when they go through these seasonal changes throughout the year. And you can see a couple examples here on this image of this silver maple, where we're looking at the buds and at the flowers. We're keeping track of when plants start to get their fruits and when those fruits are dispersed, when the leaves change in the fall and when they start to drop from the trees as well. So there are a number of different phases that we're looking at. These are called our phenophases, looking at the phenology. And they tell us what plants are doing from month to month and what part is going through changes, whether it's the flowers or the fruits or the leaves. So we ask people to make these data collection points to help us answer questions. And phenology can help us answer a lot of different questions. So I have a number of different ways that phenology is relevant here listed up on the screen. So phenology can help us better understand when to plant and when to harvest different crops. So it's used in an agricultural setting. It can also have implications for seasonal allergies. So it can help us predict when seasonal allergies might be particularly severe. And if you're a sufferer, you might know that that is really important to you. It can also help us with invasive species management. So we know in some cases that invasive species tend to leaf out earlier in the spring and summer than native species. And we can use that information to help better manage for invasive species, to take advantage of that time frame when our invaders are out and our native species have not yet emerged. So it's useful for a number of different areas, but the main reason that we are interested in phenology at Budburst is because it helps us better understand and predict the impacts of climate change. So that's what a lot of our questions are focused on. So to give a little bit of background on that, we know that springs are happening earlier and earlier, and we are going to see this pattern continue in the years to come in the future. So we're starting to see the seasonal changes of spring happening earlier in the calendar year. And this means that we are also seeing our phenological changes in plants, the ones that happen in spring, happen earlier and earlier in the calendar year as well. So this means we might see earlier buds and earlier flowers emerging. And you might be asking yourself, What's wrong with that? That doesn't seem so bad, especially if you are in a lot of the country right now that's been affected by this enormous winter storm. You might be thinking an earlier spring sounds pretty great. And while I'm inclined to agree with you in terms of the snow coverage, it does have pretty big implications, not only for the plants, but also for the ecosystem more broadly. So we at Budburst are often studying the plants, but we use that in part because that helps us better understand the entire system and the community that interacts with the plants. And this means insects and pollinators, but it also means us, the humans that rely on plants as part of our food chain as well. So to use the example that I just brought up, let's say that we have a plant that has earlier buds and earlier flowers earlier in the calendar year because of our earlier springs. So that plant is going to be more susceptible to a late frost. And if we have a late frost, that's going to damage those flowers. It could negatively impact fruit production, and that ultimately could lead to an impact in the food that's generated from that plant. So that can affect our agricultural production as well. We also have a situation where our plants and our pollinators that have historically and evolutionarily been in sync with each other, they rely on each other, we can have something that we call an ecological mismatch. So for instance, if our plant is responding to these earlier spring temps, it's responding to the temperature changes, and it has its buds and its flowers that emerge earlier in the calendar year than we've seen historically. We might have our pollinators responding to a different cue. So for instance, if a pollinator responds more to day length, that's not going to change. So our pollinators might be emerging at a different time than our plants have their blooms out. So now if our plants bloom early, but our pollinators aren't there yet, we're going to have an ecological mismatch where the plants and the pollinators are not out at the same time, and they're not able to interact in the way that they have evolutionarily and the way that makes this system, this ecosystem, function. So even though we are just looking at plants, and even though saying an earlier spring doesn't sound so bad initially, it can have these really enormous implications for how the entire ecosystems function. So that's why we at Budburst are looking at plants. We're monitoring when they go through these seasonal changes to better understand how the plants are changing and how that could affect the entire ecosystem. So throughout this talk, I am going to focus on a number of different things. We are going to talk about the research that Budburst does. We will talk about our educational work as well. And I also want to focus on what it means to be a Budburst partner, and then some of the technological updates that we've been working on the past year. But before we get into that, we have a poll that we want to run because I would like to know a little bit more about who's here in the audience, what areas of the country you're in, and then what areas of work you're in as well. If you're in the Botanic Garden Museum sector, or if you're a natural areas manager, you should see a screen pop up with that poll. So let's just take a minute and fill that out so that I can get a little bit more of an idea of where you are, and we can talk more in detail depending on your region and your professional expertise throughout this talk. I see people are filling it out. Thank you for doing that. Looks like we've got some Midwesterners. As I mentioned, I'm based in Chicago. I think most of the people who are here probably are experiencing that big winter storm right now. So I hope that you all are safe and hopefully are able to have your power still, keep warm. Okay, and we've got some educators, some land managers, botanists, natural areas professionals. This is great. Okay, perfect. So we've got a lot of folks from the Northeast, a lot of folks from the Midwest, some other people from Rocky Mountains and the Southeast. Thank you for coming to this talk. We've got educators, land managers, natural area professionals. Okay, perfect. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that information. We are going to be talking about a lot of different things that are relevant to a lot of those groups. And if there are questions that come up, we can talk more about them as well. as we go through the rest of the talk. Okay, perfect. So as I mentioned, we are going to hit on research first. So I am going to tell you a little bit more about our research projects at Budburst. So these are the projects that we're focused on right now. We have 5 main projects, and we'll get into them in detail on the upcoming slides. But just as an overview here, Budburst has some projects that are longer term. And some of them have been running since the beginning of Budburst as a project, and we plan to continue to run into the future. They're just sort of ongoing projects to collect data at a broad scale. And then more recently, we started doing shorter term projects that run for anywhere from 3 to 5 years and tend to have a more specific focused ecological question that we're trying to get an answer to. So we will get into the details on all of these different projects. And to start off, I want to talk to you about our phenology and climate project. Now, this has a lot to do with the introduction we were talking about with phenology and seasonal changes. And this project really is the core of Budburst. For a long time, this was our main focus. And as I mentioned, these are our longer term projects. So this project has been running since Budburst began in 2007. So to participate in this project, what we ask community scientists to do is to track seasonal changes in any plant at any location. So this project in particular is really accessible for anyone, no matter your age. We have activities to do with this project with kids from pre-K all the way through adult learners of any age. So you can participate in Budburst on any plant. We have research that has used this data looking at dandelions growing up in the city sidewalks. So really this project is very open-ended and anyone can participate. So no matter the plant, no matter where you are, if you're in an urban or a rural setting, you can collect data on the phenology, on the plants in your area, and it is extremely useful to Budburst. So there are a couple of different ways you can participate here. One of the ways is that you can collect data on a specific plant over the course of a year and tell us when it goes through all of these different seasonal changes or phenophases. So this is perfect if you have like a big tree in your backyard that you can watch every day while you're working from home. You can tell us when it goes through these different changes. So the way that we keep track of these data are the wheels at the bottom of this screen. And we have different wheels depending on the different plant group. So, but we are always focused on a few key parts. So we ask you to look at the flowers, at the fruit, and at the leaves and tell us what your plants are doing. And it's just as important to us when you don't have flowers or fruit. So we ask that you fill in that circle and tell us that you don't see any. So even if you're making observations in the winter right now, that's still important information for Budburst. So if you've got a plant in your yard that you can keep track of throughout the year, you can tell us when it goes through all of these different phenophases as the seasons change. And we love to have that data. That gives us a good sense of the life cycle of these plants. The other way that you can participate in Budburst is a little bit more casually. So you can make just a one-time observation if you happen to go on a walk or on a hike. Let's say you're out in the spring and you see a daffodil blooming. You can take a picture of that daffodil, tell us you see the first flower on that plant, and send us that data. You never have to visit that daffodil again, but having that data really helps Budburst. So again, this is our core project. You can be as involved or you can report really casually if you just want to send us an observation whenever you see a flowering plant that's really beautiful. The other long-term project that we have is more focused on pollinators and plants. This project is also something that we plan to run for years and years into the future. And what we ask you to do here is to document the flowering stage of your plant. So you're still looking at the different phenophases, what stage your plant is, if it's early, middle, or late flowering. And then we ask you to look for pollinators at that plant for at least 10 minutes. And all you're doing is documenting what pollinators are buzzing around that plant when they make contact with that plant and keeping account of what you see. You can also participate in this project at varying different levels. So you do not need to be an expert in terms of bee identification to participate. If you are an expert, that's fantastic. And you can hit this little expert tab and you'll have a lot more options for the different types of pollinators that you can observe. But if you are not an expert in pollinator ID, you can participate at the basic or advanced level and just tell us when you see butterflies, when you see bees, if you see birds visiting plants. All of that information is valuable to us at Budburst. And again, you can do this on any plant at any location, so it's very open-ended. Now, to get into a little bit more of our focused research projects, like I mentioned, these all have specific questions that we're asking. So with our milkweeds and monarchs question, we are asking whether monarch butterflies prefer to lay their eggs on flowering or non-flowering milkweed stems. And we're asking this question because there's some prior research that suggests that butterflies prefer to lay their eggs on non-flowering milkweed stems because those stems have fewer predators. And by predators, we mean things like spiders and ants. So for this project, you are going to still collect data on the flowering phase of your plants. You can see an example on the right-hand side of the screen here. So you're looking at whether your milkweed plant is early, middle, or late flowering. And then we ask people to look at the undersides of their leaves and try to spot monarch butterfly eggs and caterpillars. And you can see an example of what those look like at the image at the bottom of the screen here. So you can do this on a number of different milkweed species. We've got 12 species in our database that you can do this with. And the relationship here is that our monarch butterflies rely on milkweed plants. This is a really tight-knit relationship where monarchs only lay their eggs on these specific types of plants. So we are trying to better understand what plants these butterflies are interested in laying their eggs on. I don't mean to anthropomorphize the butterflies, but we're trying to collect data on whether the butterflies lay their eggs more on flowering or non-flowering plants to better help understand what our monarch butterflies are doing, and ideally to help in conserving their habitat and ensuring that they have stopover points on their migration routes, because they move from Mexico through the US all the way up into Canada, and they stop over at milkweed patches along their route. This little box in the upper corner in blue is a little bit more relevant to folks who might be in the Midwest and the Chicagoland area. But if you are ever participating in the Field Museum's Milkweed and Monarch program, we are now connected with that program. So if you collect data using the Budburst data collection form, that will also help the Field Museum. So I just want to mention that briefly. The other piece here is that we recently were able to expand this project in some really important things to a GES grant we received from the Walder Foundation. Some of this is a little bit Chicagoland specific, so I won't go into too much detail on that. But one of the really important expansions that we're going to be able to do that is relevant way beyond the Chicagoland area is that this funding is letting us translate our materials, all of our website, all of our education materials into Spanish. So in the next coming months, we will be fully bilingual and we will have a Spanish version of everything. So we will be able to have Budburst more easily accessible to Spanish speakers in communities in Chicago and obviously across the entire United States and beyond. So we're really excited about these advancements and having our project be a lot more accessible to a whole new community. In the more Chicagoland specific area, we're also going to be able to partner with our public library system and with a number of different community organizations this summer to provide take-home garden kits where folks will get a couple of milkweed plants and they'll be able to plant those in pots or in their yards and collect data with Budburst with those plants. So we're really excited about this project. Now, the other specific research project I want to talk about is our nativars research. A nativar is a cultivated variety of a native plant. So you can see in the images here on the left-hand side, that is our native plant, our false indigo. And then the three other images are cultivated varieties of that native. So these are, the three images are nativars. And you can see that they vary in terms of the color, in terms of the blooms that they have. Cultivated varieties, these nativars can sometimes be a little bit showier than the native plants. Oftentimes nativars are used for landscaping. And when we make these changes to breed them into these cultivars to the lunar eclipse, midnight, twilight varieties, we can change not just the color of the plants, but we can also have impacts on pollination, on nectar. So we don't know exactly what all of these different changes are when we have these cultivated varieties of our plants. So the Nativars Research Project is really asking it to explore that question. So we're asking whether the nativars, the cultivated varieties, attract as many pollinators as their wild relatives, or as the native plants. So we want to see if pollinators preferentially visit natives versus their nativars. So this project is a little bit more involved. If you're in the Chicago area, you can collect data with the Nativars Project at the Chicago Botanic Garden, because we have some research gardens set up for this. But if you're really interested in this question and you would like to be more involved, and you have either the space at your organization, or you can plant your own nativar garden and you can start collecting data on this project with us. We have guides for what plants to plant depending on your region. So if you're not in the Midwest, if you're in a different location, you can look at our website and get a little bit more information for species and nativars that we suggest for these gardens. And there's a lot of support there. And also you can ask me some questions afterwards. If you're interested in this project, we can help get you set up. And really the way this project works is very similar to our pollinators and climate project. We're just asking you to make pollinator observations for at least 10 minutes, but you've got this research garden set up that you're looking specifically at natives versus nativars. And then the last research project that I want to mention is the Chicago Ecoflora project. Now, this project is specifically in Chicago, as the name implies, but the Ecoflora project broadly has a number of different garden hubs. So whether you're in Chicago or in a number of other locations, we have garden hubs in New York, in Denver. Selby Botanical Garden is down in Florida, and the Desert Botanic Garden is in Arizona. So if any of those are close to you, you can participate in your own garden's version of Ecoflora. So Ecoflora was started at the New York Botanic Garden, and over the last year, 2 years, they reached out to these other garden hubs, and we have all expanded our own versions of Ecoflora. So the objective of this project is to document local biodiversity, especially to document urban biodiversity in these urban centers that all of these gardens are connected to. And each garden has a particular focus, but all of us release monthly eco quests and ask participants to look for a number of different species in that area. And they're all relevant to your specific area, wherever your garden hub is. So for instance, in Chicago, each month we ask our participants to look for a native plant that is important to pollinators, and also to look for emerging invasive plants that might become problematic in the Chicagoland area. So for instance, our project this February is looking at skunk cabbage in the Chicagoland area. I believe that's also New York's focus this month. So you can look at our website if you're in the Chicagoland area, and you can visit iNaturalist and join the Ecoflora project for any of these locations on iNaturalist as well. So if any of these are close to you, we'd love for you to participate in Ecoflora and in EcoQuests at your location. So that's a lot of the research focus that Budburst has, and I can talk more about that if there are questions at the end of this presentation. But the other central aim of Budburst is our educational goals. So I want to also talk about how Budburst can be used as an educational tool. We are really proud of Budburst in the way that it can be used to help teach students and adult learners about plants, about pollinators, about life cycle events, about climate change and data analysis. It can be used as a program to increase science literacy and really provide place-based climate change education. And there are a number of ways that we help connect this project to students, both in our area and across the country as well. So Budburst has curriculum for ages pre-K all the way through college available on our website. The curriculum is freely available. It's organized by grade band. So if you, I know there are some educators on this call, if you're an educator, whether that's K through 12 or whether that's in college, we have curriculum up and available for you using Budburst on our website. So we would love for you to use that, to take advantage of it, to use our project. You can set up classrooms with Budburst as well to manage your class through our program. And we've also been really lucky that Budburst is a program that functions really well remotely. So this is something that previously we've had students and teachers that are able to make observations on trees and plants at their school's campus. But when we all transition to working remotely and being in school remotely, Budburst is a project that you can do from wherever you are. So if you transition from school campus, now your students can collect data on plants in their yards or in their neighborhoods just as easily. So we are really excited about the curriculum that we can provide, and we do specifically have remote learning curriculum up on our website right now. We also have family activities. So if you are just looking for something to do with your kids in your spare time, we have family activities up on our website as well. I believe the age range there is from about 2nd grade through 8th grade on the family activities. So that's general Budburst curriculum as it can be used in schools all over the country, anywhere you might be. But we also have local school partnerships in Chicago. And with the local schools that we partner with, we have set them up with native art gardens. So you can see this image on the right-hand side of the screen. We go to the schools and we set up a research garden with the students. They help us plant the garden and get their hands on the plants. They learn about the species, they learn about the different cultivated varieties. And then with their science teachers, they're able to make observations, look at the pollinators, learn about pollination and life cycles, and collect data for Budburst that gets submitted to a real project. And they can see where that data is being used. They can contribute to answering these big scientific questions. And a lot of this is aimed at the middle school age group. So it's really adaptable for students of all ages. And middle schoolers are able to participate and contribute real data to our project this way. We also recently have a partnership with Scholastic. So you can see this in the banner at the bottom left of the screen with the red Scholastic banner. Now you are able to participate in Budburst plant trackers through Scholastic. This is new curriculum that the folks at Scholastic have designed using Budburst. So this differs from the Budburst curriculum that's up on our website, but this is a way for students and teachers to participate in Scholastic using Budburst. The target group here is grades 3 through 6, so it's a little bit more focused. But this contest and this project is up and running. So again, if you're an educator, if you know students in this age range who might like to participate in a project with plants, they can do Budburst plant trackers through Scholastic, and we'd love to have more participation there as well. The last thing that I want to mention on this slide is that we are now partnering with the Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden, which is down in Florida, with their Fairchild Challenge, which is a program that they run in the fall, where organizations like Budburst and a number of other organizations are able to pose a challenge to school-age students. And then those students are able to run scientific experiments, collect data, try to answer the questions in those challenges, and learn about those projects. And they partner with over 200 schools across the entire country. So if your school is partnered with the Fairchild Challenge or would like to be, you can participate in Budburst through that as well. So I wanted to focus on our educational work as well as our research, because this is really important to us. When Budburst started as a project in 2007, the main objective was educational, was using plants and seasonality to help educate people about plants, about conservation, and about climate change. So we have really maintained this work and this connection to the educational aims throughout all of our programs. So the next piece that I want to mention is how to become a Budburst partner and what it means to be a Budburst partner. And it sounds like from the poll that there are a number of different ways that you and your organizations might be able to become involved with Budburst. We have over 40 different partners that are officially associated with Budburst through this partnership, through our partnerships. And we have groups in other botanic gardens across the country. You could be just a community project that is interested in Budburst. and we work with a number of state, local, and national parks that want to partner with Budburst. So what this means if you become a partner is that you use Budburst with visitors or with community members. And this might mean that you start a Budburst garden. A number of our larger botanic garden hubs have a Budburst garden that people can visit and collect data on those plants. If you're a little bit more dispersed, maybe you're a community group or you're a state park and you don't have a particular garden space that people could visit, you can also have focal plants. And you can see in this example with Denver Botanic Garden, the plants to monitor are native plants that that group is interested in collecting data on. So it's a great way to kind of focus your work. If you are a community organization or you're in a given area, you can draw people into this partner page and let them know that these plants are really important to you and we want to collect data on them and learn more about how they're affected by climate change and what they're going through in terms of their seasonality. So if you become a Budburst partner, we ask that you contribute data to Budburst, either through having a garden or through having your focal plants. And then what we can provide as Budburst is additional programming. We can offer trainings and workshops to help get you started on how to train people to use Budburst. So we can do like a train the trainers method, or if you have a community group that wants to be trained by us directly, we can do that as well. You can also have access to data sheets that help facilitate longer term data collection that previous partners have asked for and we've generated for our partners now. And we also do a quarterly partner newsletter. So you get up-to-date information in advance about the changes that we might be going through. And oftentimes we also talk to our partners about what they need and what might work. So if you are really invested in this project and you want to have more of a say in terms of the directions that we move in, becoming a Budburst partner is a great way to be a little bit more connected to us so that we can provide a program that works for you and your organization. So we also host information about all of our partners on our website. So you can see the example here with the Denver Botanic Garden. So if you become a partner, whether it's a botanic garden or a different type of organization, we would host information about you on our website that people can visit. And a lot of times this is a great way for people to focus in on their specific area. So you can look at partners by location. So if someone is in Colorado, but they don't know where to begin, they might land on the Denver Botanic Garden page, and then they'd have a little bit more of a focus about where to start with Budburst, looking at these plants here. And one of the reasons we really love to have partners all over the country is because it helps ensure that we are getting good data from all over the country. So if you want to help us expand Budburst in your region, becoming a Budburst partner is a great way to start. Okay, the other pieces that I want to talk about, which we are really excited about, are our technological advancements that we've been going through over the past year and will continue to go through into this coming year. So we recently had a complete redesign and overhaul of our website. You can visit budburst.org to see it. It's also looks like this top banner here, the dark green. And there's a QR code on the right-hand side of the screen. If you take a picture of that, it should also take you to the Budburst website. So if you've ever visited the website before, now you will see a different look. But if you've never visited Budburst before, we're just hoping that this is a beautifully designed website that provides a lot of resources for people that are visiting. So like I already mentioned, we have a lot of new resources that are up on our website. As I mentioned, we have curriculum for educators. You can see some examples here for our high school age students. We also have the family activities, like I mentioned, and we have activities for groups. So we have this relatively recent feature where you can make a Budburst group. And this is a great way to gather people. Maybe this is in your neighborhood or at a community organization or just friends and family. You can make a Budburst group and then you can collect data all together. So it's a great way to do something together, even though we might all be in different places right now. And we have activities to help structure what groups do. So for example, you might do a phenology blitz in your neighborhood with your neighborhood group that you create. So that's a way that you could use Budburst as a little organization. We also think that groups are a great way for partner organizations to help organize what they do with their participants as well. Okay, and then the next big piece is that we are creating a mobile app where you can collect data from your phone. So the Budburst app is something we, again, have been working on for the past year, and it is about to launch. So this app is launching in about a month, in mid-March, and we are really excited to finally have this ready to give to people, to give to our community scientists, to have it in your hands where you can play with and see what works and collect data. Our objective with creating this mobile app, this is a resource that we haven't previously had before. Right now, if you participate in Budburst, you can collect data on your computer. So you can go outside in the real world, take a picture, document what your plant is doing, come back inside, enter it on your computer. And you can still do that right now and in the future. But we're creating this new resource of this mobile app so that folks can more easily take a picture on the go, in your yard, in your garden, on a walk, take a picture of a plant that you see, fill in that data really easily and send it right off to us. So we're really hoping this lowers the activation energy and lets people collect data more easily on the go and submit data to Budburst from your phone wherever you are. There are a couple of new features that we have with this technology expansion. One of the things that we're really excited about is that the app that we're building is going to be able to identify plants for you. So if you take a picture, especially if it's a picture of the flower, we are going to be able to generate species ID suggestions for you. And you can see that in the image of the sunflower here. So if you take a picture, the app is going to give you suggestions for what species it might be. So we have integrated, if this sounds familiar, it's because we've integrated iNaturalist technology, and we're able to have that built into our app to generate these IDs for us. So even more than before, you do not have to be a plant expert to be able to participate in Budburst. And in fact, with this new ID tool, you can really use it as an educational tool to learn about the plants around you. So we are really excited about that new feature. That is also going to be present if you enter data on your computer. So the same way, if you upload a picture of a flower, the computer is going to be able to give you those species suggestions as well. So if you like that feature, it's going to be present in both places no matter what. But we are really excited about this app and how close it is to actually being functional and getting out to our Budburst participants. So I will, let's see. Yes, I'll mention this now. So if you are interested in learning more about the app when it comes out, you can leave your email address in the chat and I will collect those. Moira will help me collect them and we will send you an email when the app is ready and you can download it to get a little bit of a reminder. So you feel free to leave your emails. That will be the only email I send you. So I won't send you a bunch of other Budburst things if you're not interested in it. It would just be a reminder to download the app when it's ready. So if this is interesting to you, if you'd like to be reminded, just drop your email in the chat and we will collect that information and you will hear from me hopefully in about a month when the app is ready for release. So lastly, just to wrap up here, if you are interested in the work that I've been talking about in the research, in the educational aspect, if you want to participate in Budburst, we would love to have you join our team of community scientists. We have an amazing group of people at this point, over 16,000 people across the US and into Canada that help us collect data on plants all over the country, wherever they are, wherever you might be. We would love to have you join us, become a community scientist with Budburst. You can make observations on your plants, collect data, and ultimately help us answer big questions about climate change and about ecological differences that we see in our plants across the country. So we would love to have you join us and help us collect more data. Also, if you are a part of an organization or if you have a community group that you think might be interested, we would love to have you become even more involved and be a Budburst partner. If you want to use Budburst more broadly at your organization, if you think other people on your team would be interested as well, please become a partner. We'd love to have you. You can also make a group, like I mentioned before. You can make groups whether you're a partner or not. But if you're a partner, we think groups is a great way to kind of pool all of the people that are working on something at your organization together and collect data together. And lastly, just a reminder, if you want to get that app in March, please give us your email addresses and I will be sure to follow up with you when it's ready and when you can start collecting data with us more easily. You can do the data collection right now anyway. And before I go, I just want to mention the other people that are on this team. I'm here giving you the talk, but there are a lot of people who made all of this work possible. We're all at the Chicago Botanic Garden. We've got Sarah Jones, our education manager, and Taryn Lichtenberger, our community engagement manager. The three of us are really the core Budburst team, but we also have two co-PIs who oversee the project. Both of them have been on the project the entire time it's been at the Chicago Botanic Garden, and Kay has been on the project since it began in 2007. And then we also have fabulous developers that work with us and have really allowed us to do all of these technological advancements that we've been working on for the past year. Bianca Rosenbaum and Charlie Hoffman are our developers at the garden, and they've made a lot of this advancement possible. So there's a great team working on all of these pieces. And with that, I am about done. I think that we do have time for questions. So I believe you drop them in the chat, we can collect them. And if you want to email me directly, you can grab that email address. And then we have more information on our website, budburst.org, or you can take a picture of the QR code to get that information as well.
So thank you, Emma. That was really fascinating. I am not a scientist by background, but it just is so appealing to me that I can participate. I can, use my phone. I can follow just plants that are around me or go on a hike and make this now a part of my life. It's a fascinating project. And I could tell through some of the commentary, people just really are excited about some of the directions you're taking Budburst, particularly the mobile app. I do see a lot of emails going in.
That's great. We are really excited about the mobile app too. We think it's going to allow a lot more people to submit data much more easily.
So we did have a few questions that came in, and if you think of others, you can certainly put them in the chat. But we talking about the Ecoflora gardens. You mentioned the one in Chicago. Somebody was asking specifically about Philly, but are there other Ecoflora gardens around the nation?
Yes, there are. So let me go back to that slide. Yes. So that's a great question. There are a number of different Ecoflora hubs. There isn't one in Philly, but if you're in any locations here, so if you're in New York, if you're in Denver, Selby is down in Florida, and the Desert Botanic Garden is, I believe, in Phoenix, Arizona. So if any of those are close to you, then you are close to an Ecoflora garden hub and you can participate in those eco quests. And then, this project is a particular project that we're running for 3 years. But for instance, if the person from Philly is part of an organization or is connected to a botanic garden that's in Philly that is interested in this project, you can reach out to me and we can connect you with the rest of the organizations. It's a particular grant run project. So we are running for 3 years right now, but I would imagine that we will try to continue this project in the future. And if there are more gardens that are interested, I'm sure we can expand beyond what these hubs that we're currently in. Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting news. So the Budburst curriculum, I think, can you just mention again, there were some questions about the age groups, just some of the age groups that your curriculum is readily and freely available, right?
Yes, let me move to that slide as well. So yes, our curriculum it's freely publicly available on our website. If you click that QR code or you go to budburst.org, there's a tab for educators. And under that tab, you will see curriculum for a number of different grade bands. So we have curriculum from very young kids like pre-K through 2nd grade, all the way through higher ed and college curriculum. And right now our education manager, Sarah Jones, is working on filling in all of those different grade bands and expanding and revising some of the curriculum. So it's definitely something that changes and evolves, and we are currently working on it. But right now we have remote learning curriculum up that's available for grades 3 through 5. We also have pollinator and native art curriculum for 2nd grade, 4th grade, I believe 6th through 8th grade. So it varies a little bit in terms of the project and the grade band, but we do have material up for really pre-K through college. So if you are an educator that is at all interested in Budburst, we should have some activities up there for you currently and more to come in the future.
That's great. And so pandemic adaptable. It really is terrific. How about becoming, is there a cost to becoming a partner?
Nope, there is no cost. Everything Budburst related is free. So you can become a partner. All that we ask is that you collect data with us. That's really all that's involved. If you become a partner, we want you to collect data with us to provide Budburst with data at your location. And then we will host information about you on our partner page. And like I mentioned, there are a couple of specific resources that you have access to, like the additional data sheets for partners, and you get the partner newsletter, but it's all free and it's pretty adaptable. Like if you're a community organization, you don't have to necessarily be a botanic garden to be a partner. You can be a community organization and work with us as well.
Okay. And then just to become a partner, you just notify you. Is there an application process?
There is an application process. You can email me. I can go back to the email slide. You can email me, or you can email the info@budburst.org. And there is a brief application process. It's a 2-page form. We just ask for information like I have on the Denver Botanic Garden example. We ask for a paragraph summarizing your organization and information like if you have social media, and then what plants you'd like to focus on. So it's a pretty simple application process.
So somebody's asking, does Budburst also track phenology of invasive plants?
We do, yes. So we have over 400 official Budburst species. And all that means is that those are species that we have a little bit of extra information on our website that you can look up on our website. And we do track both native and invasive plants. We obviously do not advocate for to plant invasive plants, but we do still want to collect information on invasives to see, like I mentioned, some of the work that we've done on that invasives tend to leaf out earlier than native plants. So having that information is because we can do data collection on both invasives and natives. So we do collect that. And if you're looking through our Budburst official plants, which are all listed on our website, if you get into the information about a specific species, it should tell you if it's an invasive, so you know what you're looking at and what you're keeping track of. But that's a great question.
So you have a fellow community science researcher in the audience, and wants to know, this program is really taking off. You know, can you speak to what worked in terms of recruiting and getting information out about this program?
Yeah, that is a good question, and it's a big question. So Budburst has gone through a lot of changes over the years. Like I mentioned, we began in 2007, and I shouldn't really say we. I was not on the project in 2007, but like I mentioned, some of us were. Kay was on the project from the very beginning. And we've been hosted at a few different organizations. So the Budburst project has been at the Chicago Botanic Garden since 2017. So it's gone through a couple of different iterations. There's always been the long-term data collection on plant phenology, but since we've been at the Chicago Botanic Garden, we've created the shorter-term research projects. We've also obviously been able to make a lot more local connections with community organizations and schools in Chicago. But there's been a lot of growth, both since 2017, since being at the Chicago Botanic Garden, and also really in the last year. Like I showed you, this team, the people in the top 3 row, myself included, we all started in the last year. So Budburst has really been able to expand a lot due to some generous funding, we are a purely grant-supported project. So all of the work that we do is from funding that we find to support Budburst. And we've been able to expand in the last year because we got some very generous funding, and we've been able to create these 2 new positions of education manager and community engagement manager. They didn't exist before. So we have been able to expand our staff, and through having more staff, we've been able to increase school partnerships, community partnerships. We've been able to work with a couple different local organizations like the Forest Preserves of Cook County and the Chicago Parks District. So we have been expanding a lot, and we are continuing to expand with the new technological advancements. I think that having a project that is really adaptable for people of all ages and all background levels has been really instrumental in the work that we've been able to do.
So I think we have at least time for this last question. So it's really difficult to start a native garden with closely local ecotypes. Does the source ecotype area impact the Budburst data interpretation?
That is a good question, and we only have 3 minutes left. So I would say that when we are looking at the data, so part of analyzing the data for Budburst is that because it's a community science project and we have a vast amount of data, we have over 100,000 data points, we are, depending on the question, we are looking at a pretty coarse grain analysis. So for instance, we might be looking at what are elm trees doing in all of this geographical range. So in that case, might be looking more broadly at these larger patterns across the entire US. And if we see variation from particular regional areas, or if we see differences comparing urban and rural areas in terms of what the plants are doing, like at urban heat centers versus in rural areas. So right now, we are not paying that much attention to particular ecotypes. That said, if you are interested in that, that's something that someone could explore if they look in the data really specifically and they want to have a focus on a very specific region, or if you want to do comparisons, like for instance, if you want to look in Illinois, but at different places within Illinois, you could do that with the data. So the data can be explored in a number of different ways, in part because we do have such a large data set and it's over such a broad geographic range. It does tend to be a little bit more coarse, but if you want to explore more specific questions, it absolutely can be done with the data.
So just one last question that kind of gets back to the curriculum. Is it mapped to science standards by any chance?
Yes, it's aligned with Next Gen Science Standards. All the curriculum is, both our curriculum and the scholastic curriculum as well.
Well, great. Well, this has been terrific. I know that I have learned a lot, and I just really want to thank you for taking the time to join us and share the wonderful projects that you're doing. We got lots of people who would like to be notified about the app, so that's exciting, and I know I'll be downloading it. So Emma, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to everybody for coming.
Bye-bye.